All right, everybody, and we're back. And it's COMP2068, the winter 2016 semester, and it's week 10, part 1 of our broadcast. I know that school is closing today at 1, so I'm not expecting anyone to actually be watching this live, actually. But if you are, that's cool. If you're going to watch it live or if you're watching it from home, I have this concept board that I'm sharing with you right now where you can ask questions, and we can use this as a way of communicating between us. So we can use this concept board, and the link for this concept board I'm going to put up on Blackboard. So I'm going to kind of copy this link, and then I'm going to go to our notifications here on Blackboard. So I'm going to go to Advanced Web, and inside the notifications here, I'm going to edit the notifications so you can actually see the link to this the concept board. So I'll say concept board link. And then we'll paste that in, and what we'll do is we'll make it a link, right? So that way, when you go in there, you can actually make it kind of work. So that'll be the concept board link, and I'll update this in a second, so you can join me here on concept board to ask questions. So submit. There we go. So this is where you can find me on concept board. And concept board, again, I'm just using this thing as a means of communication. So this is our COMP2068 discussion. So if you're watching live, I'm going to check here periodically to see if you've got any questions or concerns or anything else we have to talk about. So again, today is kind of like a snow day, and we're sitting up in March 24th of 2016, and a little bit unexpected, but it is what it is. So we'll see what we can do. So I want to talk about a couple things today. One of the first things I want to talk about is I want to talk about assignment or the final project, and I've kind of prepared some stuff for the final project right here. So let's pull up the final project details. Hold on a second. So here's our final team project. This is the first part, what I want to talk about. So we've been talking about this final team project for a while, right? Like I've been talking about how this thing is going to function. And remember I talked about how it's going to be broken up into 4 parts. So this is where 30% of your final grade. The first part of your final project is due next week. That's Friday, April the 1st at midnight. Okay, so that's when it's due. Really what I'm looking for here is your project concept, all right? By the way, and if I was going to read the overview for what it is, so you working within a group of up to 4 people, I'm going to allow up to 4 people for this one, or on your own, if you really feel like doing it on your own, and utilizing your accumulated knowledge of the mean stacks, that's Mongo, Express, Node, and then maybe Angular if you want to do that as an optional front end. Right, you're going to create a web app from one of the following app templates. So either a survey site we talked about before, some kind of brackets tournament web app, or an incident management web app. So those are the 3 different ones I'm asking you to do, right? Or one of the 3. Again, I kind of mentioned this before to you in another video, but I'll say it again. Survey site, for the most part, that's one of the easiest to do. Brackets or tournament site is a more challenging one. That's like on a challenge level. This would be, let's say we'll make this level 5 or level 6. This would be more like a level 7, and this would be like a level 9. Okay, so this is how it's much more challenging to do. Your website must be, or web app must be hosted live on a live site that supports Node servers. That means either something like a Azure website, or it could be something like a Heroku site, someplace where your app is supported. Okay, so it can't be on local school web server or anything like that, just like normal. All right, so that's nothing different there. Let's talk about due dates again. So go back to this. So your concept for your app is going to be due next week on Friday. So I mean, you and your partners are going to get together and come up with your first draft of your external document. That's what you're going to be talking about here, and your initial project structure setup. So that means like what project structure you're going to use. You're going to set up your GitHub repo and set up your cloud provider. All that stuff is due by next Friday, and that's going to be a value of 5%. Right. So 5% out of the 30. That's what this one is. And this is actually 10 marks because the whole project is worth 60 marks. So 10 out of 60 is next Friday. That's what's going to happen. So as soon as you get this piece done, you're going to be marked on this stuff. Okay, part 2. Part 2 is your landing page and site security. So landing page and site security, all the regular stuff that's going to be due, that's part 2. That's going to be due the week after that on April the 8th, right? And again, that's on the midnight. And what I'm looking for is your first landing page, the style and everything else to work out, as well as site security to make sure that the stuff we talked about, authentication with Mongo and stuff, is working. And that's going to be due Friday, April the 8th at midnight. Okay, so it's another 5%. And again, 10 out of 60 marks. So then right now, if you've done just those 2 pieces, you'll have 20 out of 60 potentially. Okay, and that's not including any kind of bonus points or anything else. One more thing is part 3. So part 3 is where we have a bit more structure. This is like where most of your app is functional, most of your app here. And you have your main functionality plus your DB setup, your DB structure. So all your database, your collections in your database, and everything else is all functional by the following week, so April 15th. So April 15th, everything is running fine. That's the 13th week of our semester here. And that's a value of 10%. So that's actually 20 marks out of 60. So that's these two combined pretty much, right? And finally, by not the next Friday, but actually the Wednesday of the final week of classes, so that's week 14, just before your exam day, which is on the Thursday, right? We're going to get together and do this piece here. And this is, well, you're going to get together with your team. What's due is your final version of your external document, right? But again, you do your first draft here, you update it here, you update it here, and then by part 4, you actually submit your final version and any finishing touches to the website, things like functionality, things that were left out, missing in part 3 that you couldn't get done. And again, I'm looking for main functionality. So if you're doing an example of this would be your survey. Surveys have to function at this point. Maybe one piece that doesn't work is your reporting system. Your reporting system is not quite functional by this part. That's okay. You're still going to get most of it. But everything has to be complete, all your finishing touches and everything by the Wednesday, April 20th, not the Friday, okay? And the reason for this is because your exam is on Thursday. Last day of class is on Thursday for you. So I want to make sure that everything is due and handed in before we get together for your exam, okay? So that's really your project schedule in a nutshell. It's 30% of your final grade, but it's broken up over several little assignments. Right now, one can be done without the other. So let's say, for example, I don't know, whatever reason, you and your team miss the first part. So part 1, you miss it. You missed the due date. Well, guess what? You can never get that 5% back. That 5% is done. But you can still do part 2, 3, and 4, which means you can still do 25 out of 30, right? For your total, or sorry, yeah, 25% out of 30, right? Which is pretty good. That's most of the marks are going to be there, right? So more than 75% of the marks are ready for you, right? So this piece. And what about if you do the first part, the second part, you don't get the main functionality, but you finally finish it off on week 4? Well, then you miss this 10%. If you don't deliver on time, then you never get this part back, this 10%, right? So it doesn't depend on everything else. From a team member perspective, I highly recommend that you work with as many players as you can muster. If you can get 4 good team members going for this one, it's going to lighten your load. I'm sure by this time around, you're going to have all kinds of other assignments and other things, other projects that are be giving to you from other professors. And I don't want it to clash with the stuff that we're doing. So I'm making it a little easier for you guys, but in that you'll have more horsepower to complete your work, okay? Please don't try and be a hero and do this on your own. It's very challenging. Even to do the survey site on your own, it's a bigger project, a bigger assignment. You really need to understand all the piece parts, and it's always good to partner program with at least one other person. So I said up to 4 members. I'm really hoping that there's at least 2 people in your team every single time. Okay, so that's really, the structure of this project, right? Here's some common requirements that each web app will share, right? So each web app is going to have, of course, it's got to be well structured with good semantic HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Implement a responsive front end framework. So again, either Foundation or Bootstrap, with AngularJS as an option. Okay, it doesn't have to be. It's not required. It's an option, right? Along with a dynamic backend. So use Node, Express, Mongo, all that stuff is on the back end, right? Using all JavaScript technologies, right? Your site has to be responsive again, so that's worth a certain amount of points. CSS rules reside in separate files, so this is just site structure we're talking about here. Your JavaScript files, libraries, all the external code are contained in their own folder and appropriately linked to your site. I recommend you use CDNs, but you don't have to use CDNs to make everything work, only because from a production perspective, it'll be more performant. That's how it can work. This is the final version. You may want to include CDNs. It's okay if you don't. Your images and multimedia assets are contained in their own folder. This is all the stuff we normally set up for your project, right? All your code, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, jQuery, all of that is error-free, whatever you decide to use. So there's no errors. Your Mongo database must be hosted online. So note, recommended that you host it on MongoLab or Google Cloud Platform, Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure. There's all kinds of, you don't have to use a Mongo database, a MongoLab. You could use DocumentDB, IndexedDB. You could use Firebase. some form of NoSQL database will take the place of Mongo, and I'd be okay with that. All right, but please don't use MySQL, a SQL database, or any kind of structured query language-based database, relational database. I'm not looking for a relational database here. That would be bad, and you would lose your marks for your structure. All right, include internal documentation. Again, this is the part that a lot of people miss, the internal documentation piece. They forget to put things like, you know, the file name, all your team's names, the authors of each of your pages, and so on, website name, and so on. You miss this, and this is worth like 5 marks of your internal documentation, and that's kind of, it's silly to miss. This is kind of an easy one to get, right? Then your external document. There's an external document for this particular project. One part is the wireframe section. So here's the wireframe section, and what I want you to do is make wireframes for each of your views. Right now, again, my recommendation to you is you don't try and make this, you know, even though it's responsive, I don't care for you to make it mobile specific or mobile first. And the reason for that is that you'd have to add additional wireframes for each of your views. So let's say you said, well, it works on desktop, mobile, and tablets. Great, right? If it's responsive. But if you say, I have views specific for those platforms, mobile, desktop, and tablet, and you'd have to create wireframes for that. And you're only getting paid 2 marks for this thing. So for you to create like crazy amount of wireframes for this section, I don't recommend it. I think you should stick to desktop only that's responsive. So it'll work on mobile and tablet, but there isn't a specific way of doing it. So that's the one thing, right? The next piece is from a screen capture section. You want to get screen captures, but this piece won't be, you can't do screen captures until probably at the earliest week 2, right? Most likely week 3 of your project, because you won't have any screen captures. You can do this piece of your external document for sure, but screen captures are going to be something you have to reserve for week 3 and 4, right? When you update your document then. So that's really this piece. Let's see the next piece. So we keep going on. Talk about potential future functionality. Like, what if you had more time? What would you do if you had, if you didn't have the time constraints that you do right now? What would you add in there, or what would you remove? Share your files on GitHub and demonstrate version control best practices, and push your site to a cloud host. That's worth 8 marks. So that's, everybody's got that as a requirement. Every single one. All your projects have this kind of structure and everything else. And some of this is going to be due at different stages of your development, as mentioned above. Here's your survey site. So if you're going to do the survey site, what you want to do is make a survey site like a SurveyMonkey, as an example. We talked about this in class last time, where you have user registration must be included. Actually, that's kind of a common thing. I kind of probably should have included user registration as part of the stuff that's included in every other web app, right? Not just this one, but also the tournament site, as well as the incident management piece. You need user registration and site security, right? That's what this piece is all about. So, and that's one thing that's due, your site security. This is kind of due week 2, right? So user registration, you have to have all that banged out, how to take care of all this stuff from an admin perspective by week 2. I'm going to give you some of this today. So then you'll have the means how to do site security and user registration by today. Okay, users can create a survey. This is functionality, right? So users can create a survey. Please stick to, and I recommend this, don't make too many templates, 1 or 2 possible survey templates. So example would be, okay, what kind of survey do you want to make it? Do you want to make it like a multiple choice survey, agree, disagree, short answer? I don't need you to mix and match. Okay, mixing and matching is outside the scope of what you have time for. If you try and do mix and match, so some multiple choice, some agree, disagree, some short answers, you know, all this kind of stuff, it's going to be too much. So please, that would be a bonus. I would say make 1 template at first so that it's all multiple choice. Let's say 10 questions as an example, and it's fixed. It's not like a fluid number of questions they can ask. Once you get this going, then you can add fluidity. You can say, okay, well, here's some options. You can add, you know, up to 5 or 10 multiple choice questions and different disagree and agree and short answers and stuff. Add those functionalities in later as bonus. But the requirement is only 1 or 2 templates max, and they're fixed. So which one do you want would be the question, multiple choice or agree, disagree, as an example, right? The user must be able to customize survey questions. So you can make the survey questions different and the survey options. So there's questions and then the options, A, B, C, D. Obviously, if it was multiple choice, would be the different options. So an example would be, the survey question could be, what's your favorite browser? And then the survey options would be A, IE, or Edge, B, Chrome, C, Firefox, or D, Safari. Which one would it be, right? So you choose which one you like, and that's the option. So there's options and questions, and they're included in this B, right, piece. They usually be able to create a lifetime for the survey. So how long the lifetime the survey lasts before it expires. Okay, this is a little bit challenging. You have to keep track of time here. Some people mess this up because the survey lasts forever. It can't last forever. The survey's got to expire. So you only have a survey for a small length of time, and then you get your results. Anonymous users can respond to any active survey. So it doesn't have to be a registered user. An anonymous user can see an active survey on the front page, on the landing page here, and respond to it to give you more data. All right, that's how this would function. If you want to make it so that only registered users can respond to the survey, that would be bonus. Okay, so if you're a registered user, you can check to see, and then you can respond to the survey. That would be okay. Secure reporting structure section. This piece would be done probably before week 4. So the general functionality of the survey would be here, and then what would happen would be the rest of it, right? So your reporting section, this piece here with reporting, like a registered user would be able to get simple analysis for any survey that he or she owns, and statistics for each survey can be exported in some manner, email, printed, whatever. We talked about email. Maybe you can use something like some kind of email program or email service like SendGrid to do that. That's kind of the last piece, and this is worth 5 marks total. So again, this is like your finishing touches stuff that you have in for your final. Notice that although you have UI, you have 2 pieces. There's the UI piece as an example, and there's also the functionality piece, right? So UI and functionality. That means when you have UI pieces, it's not just putting controls on the on your application. It's also how the application looks, the styling of the application, and so on. All those kind of things are the things that I'm looking for when it comes to UI. White space, balance, all that kind of stuff, how nice it looks. So every piece of it, of this particular project and others as well, has UI. And this is where I kind of give you a bit from how the actual thing is styled out and so on. Okay, so that's kind of your survey site. Okay, let's get to the attorney bracket site. So very similar to the survey site, you have your user registration and security. I'm not going to go into that. It allows you to log in, log out, modify his profile, all that stuff. You create a tournament. Here's your tournament, and the tournament is kind of only a new single elimination tournament. And I kind of gave you an example of this. I'll kind of give you another one again. And I see that there's a couple people logged on. I'll check for questions back in a second. So if I go to attorney brackets, right, online, search for that. I kind of did this last time. There's something called challenge, right? I think this is a great one to emulate if you can kind of figure out how this works. You can certainly log in and try and figure this out. And then if you notice, this is a connect. It's interesting. We have a connect flash in here. You can sign up and you can generate your brackets and so on. And you can see that as an example here, you have 2 users, or a bunch of 2 people here. They kind of have a challenge, and then whoever wins goes to the next bracket. And then from these ones, whoever wins goes to this bracket here. And then you combine these brackets to create almost like a the winning path. So you see, who came in first in this particular challenge, who came in second, who came in third, and so on, or third or fourth, right? So that's how it works from you take a look at this. Challenge is an interesting site to emulate. So take a look at how they did it, and you can create a brackets tourney site, okay? So again, what you want to do is you want to create a tournament, but only single elimination tournament. Don't make double elimination or anything like that. Each tournament will have a name and include a short description. So what's this tournament called? It's a special tournament tournament that's going to be hosted, whatever. When a user creates a tournament, he is considered the owner. I can choose when it becomes active and when it's completed. So you can kind of choose the time frame or when it's over. You can basically be the moderator, okay? The users can register players. So if the user can register a number of players that come on. And again, I recommend that you have an even number of players, 8 or 16. Don't have some odd number. That way you'll have to figure out how the buy system would work, because there won't be an even number of wins. So please try either 8 or 16 as a basis. Once you figure this out, and if you want to make it so that you can have any number of players, again, bonus opportunity. But please get your core functionality working first, and then we get to this, okay? An active tournament will display a list of players to anonymous users, right? Okay, so a list of players. Now, the players don't have to be the actual player names. You can choose whatever player name you want. Depending on the number of players, there will be a fixed number of tournament bouts initially. 4 bouts for 8 players, 8 bouts for 16 players. So bouts are rounds, tournament rounds. And then opponent selection for each bout will be decided in player registration order. So it doesn't have to be random. So however you register, those are the people you're going to fight. So if 2 people, let's say Tom registers first, then Rich registers second, Tom and Rich are going to challenge each other. As a bonus, you can always, put an option in there so that you can randomize who is going to challenge whom. Okay, that's up to you. Please get the core functionality working again, like I said, and then randomize who the players are going to be challenging later on, or give the option to randomize. Okay, tournament management. So after the tournament's done, you've got your tournament, you know who won or whatever. A tournament can be started only after all players have been registered and the initial bouts determined. So who's going to fight whom, right? A tournament will include a fixed number of rounds. Again, 3 rounds for 8 players, 4 rounds for 16 players, and so on. Each tournament round will be displayed as a separate form page. Okay, so this is a separate view that's going to come up. That's going to be generated. All right. Now, some people asked the last time we did this, can you do it in one page? Can you use Ajax or some kind of something like that, like Angular, to do kind of double data binding or 2-way data binding to swap out what you see on the page? Sure, certainly you can, but it's got to look like a separate form page. All right. The tournament owner will be able to select the winners for each bout in every round. So the tournament owner, whoever wins. Now, what you'd want to try and do instead of manually selecting, right? You want to be able to select automatically. So, for example, if the one player gets 3 points, the other player gets 4 points, obviously the person with 4 points goes through. Only the winners will be carried forward into new bouts for each successive round. The losers will be put into a losers list somewhere, and they'll be, kind of registered there. And the reason for that is you don't want to miss the losers, because sometimes you need to determine from the losers who's going to come in 3rd or 4th. Okay, when the final round is completed, a summary of the results will be displayed. So just a summary of how it's going to be. All right, and that's it. There isn't any other. So when I say summary of results, who's first, who's second, who's third, and who's fourth, pretty much. That's what's going to happen here. So, I mean, core functionality, some of this is not core functionality. Again, registration and all that by week 2. Creating a new tournament, I would say that's, the beginning. Registration of players, I think this is not core functionality. It's neat, but you can have a fixed player list in the beginning. And this registration of players thing I would have in as, part 4 for this one. But part 3 should have a tournament. The tournament should be able to run by itself in part 3. Right, so by week 3, you should have this tournament piece running. By week 4, you can register players, and maybe if as a bonus you want to randomize, that's up to you, right? So there's different pieces here that you can focus people on to work on. Okay, here's the difficult one: incident management. Incident management is more challenging because there's more piece parts, and there's some stuff here that's inferred that you have knowledge of how this thing works. Right, but you need to understand how incident management works. So what is an incident management system? And I talked about this before, right? What you want to do is take a look at an existing incident management system as it is. And one of them is, like I mentioned before, is something called Remedy by BMC, right? So if I look at BMC software Remedy 9, right, which is an IT service management suite, it includes things like this incident management reporting system, right? Now they have a web-based reporting system, and it's also now responsive and ready for mobile and so on, which is kind of cool. Now back in my day when I was doing incident management, it was only a native application that was running on Windows. It wasn't available anywhere else, and so on. Now the great thing is if you look at products and solutions, they have a number of them, right? What you want to do is you want to look at something like Remedy Service Management Suite, right? Which is, one of the ones they use for, IT service management. And this is the one that they use, right? So you might be able to see an overview video of how it works. This is kind of neat if you watch the overview video. And it kind of tells you how the whole Remedy experience works. It's also ITIL compatible if you're someone who's into standards, right? Now, without going too crazy about what I'm expecting here, we're going to make a cut-down version of an incident management system either way. Think about it as a ticketing system, right? Ticketing system. So let me go back to the document here so we can talk about this. So again, user registration, security, all that stuff is there. That's by week 2. Incident dashboard. Okay, so the dashboard keeps track of all the tickets that are kind of active in the system. Okay. This is the main functionality, right? So now there's extra sections here, but your main functionality is all around how to create an incident record. And what that means is think about an incident record as a ticket. So when a new incident is created, a form will be displayed that will require the user to select or to complete several fields, including the incident description. My computer's down, man. My incident priority, right? So, how urgent is this thing? Is it, and you can find priority by, or severity, if you will, by a cross-sectioning urgency versus impact versus urgency. So how many people does it impact versus how urgent it is, right? So that's this piece. And also customer information and just the beginning of an incident narrative about how this thing starts off. So like what this thing's about. The new incident record, which is the ticket, will be stored in a numerical order, and it's going to be generated by the system. So depending on the date, typically a date generated or whatever random number it's going to be, but it's going to be in numerical order. So I can always go to the next ticket and the next ticket. Each incident record or ticket will include an incident narrative that will be timestamped with every status change. Anything you change on the ticket will be there'll be a timestamp that will be added into the incident record. Okay, that's what's going to happen. Okay, so that's what's going to happen then. And each incident record will have a status field associated with it, and basically you can do with the status. Initially, it's going to be set to new, but there's going to be several different statuses, and we're going to talk about this. If you're really interested in doing incident management, you really need to meet with me. You and your team need to meet with me next week when it comes to your concept, because I want to go over in detail with you how this thing can work. It's a very challenging one. If you're a superheroic group, you can work on this one. If you're really comfortable with the mean stack and everything else, the way things are functional, and you really want to put yourself into a challenge situation, this is the one for you. I'll tell you that every semester, I only have maybe 1 or 2 groups that handle this one, because it's a pig. It's really hard to get done. And it's been done fairly good several times in a row. When I get back next week, when I see you guys, maybe I'll give you some examples of the work, to give you some examples of works that's already been done that are really good. Okay, now there's one piece that's incident management. So a registered user can change the status field. So it's one thing to create an incident record. It's another thing to manage it. And you can see that there's so much information here about how to make this work. I would say, again, creating your incident record, as an example, that's going to be core functionality. Your incident dashboard, like the list of incident records, I mean, you can mock this up. Again, this is not as important. This can be like week 4. But unfortunately for you guys, if you're doing this one, both 3 and 4 are going to be required, these 2 pieces, as core functionality, because they kind of go hand in hand, for week 3, right? In which your incident dashboard being the only thing that's left over for week 4, where you don't have a list, you don't have a fixed list or a dynamic list. You can just click on one incident as an example at a time. But creating at least you should be able to do 1 incident record and manage 1 incident by week 3. And then if you want to do multiple incidents, you'd have an incident dashboard that'd be working with a database by week 4. Okay, so that's really it in a nutshell. That's your work. Again, an external document for your project, a zip archive of your website's project files, and I would say and a link to GitHub, and also one thing that I'm missing here, and I want to kind of add in here as I'm talking. So I want to have a link to your GitHub repo. So link to your GitHub repo, right? That's one thing, and which is going to be for your team, right? Your team GitHub repo. The second thing is, and we didn't talk about GitHub and version control too much, but I'm going to go back up there and talk about it in a second. The other thing is a link. I want a link to your cloud provider's live site. I need that, and then a zip archive of your project files, on Blackboard. Submitted to Blackboard. Submitted to Blackboard. That's what I think I need. Okay, so I think I want to put that in there. This. So all that's due. Now, some of this deployed to cloud service. This is actually worth 30, not 25. That was a mistype. I modified this document. This document, by the way, for the most part, is available online right now. And Blackboard has all your spaces. Blackboard has all your spaces. I'm getting all kinds of messages. She wants to come over Saturday. Great. Nothing to do with me. You have all your spaces for submitting everything. So just letting you know that this is the case in terms of how the project is laid out. One thing to note is this: even though I've got a strict kind of project timeline, what if you and your group are really ambitious, as an example, and you want to finish the project off sooner, right? As long as each of the parts up on Blackboard, all the details are submitted on Blackboard for each of the parts, it's good. It's good for me. I'm good to go, right? Kind of thing. I don't need to. You don't need to wait till the last minute to finish everything off. You can complete your assignment, your whole project, by week 12 if you really want to, right? If you can, you and your team can muster it. But each of these containers for each of these parts have to be filled up with what I'm looking for. So please don't rush and get just part 4 done. That's not gonna count for part 1, 2, and 3. You have to have your submissions for part 1, 2, and 3, and 4 done on Blackboard with all the details that I'm looking for. But if you want to finish earlier, you certainly can. You don't have to do that. So if you want to, you don't have to wait for each of these weeks. Chances are, for the most part, if you're working with somebody else, it's going to be this schedule, right? Because it's rare that I have people submitting things early. So let me see if there's any questions. I'm going to go back to concept board here and see if there's any questions that you guys might have, right? So I see some drawing. Thank you very much for drawing, but that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for any questions related to the project. It's a big one, and it's important, that we get this one done for 30% of your grade. And I'm trying to give you as many details as I can here, even though I know we're kind of shut down for the day. But please take a look at the details up online. I want to make sure that you guys all understand everything that's required. So no questions? So you guys are clear about the project, I'm guessing, and whoever's online anyway. Okay, well, thank you very much for that one. Let me go back to the project outline for 1 second. I want to look at Blackboard for a second. So from a Blackboard perspective, if I was going to look at assignments, there's been several, but let's take a look at the bottom. So I've broken it out so each assignment has its own part. So part 1, part 2, part 3, and part 4. Each one of them has a due date. Remember that the last one is due on the Wednesday, not the Friday, because you have your final exam on the Thursday, right? And each part has a submission criteria. You need to kind of submit everything. One other thing to note is this: even though I don't mention the external document here, part 2 or part 3, I still require it in part 2 and part 3 because you want to update it as you go, right? The external document is what I'm going to be looking for in part 2 and part 3 as well. An updated version of your external document and the final version here on part 4. Okay, so that's really your project in a nutshell. I'm going to stop the recording here really quickly, so that way the first recording that we've done, right, it really outlines everything to do with your project. And then I'm going to restart the recording when I want to start talking about a couple things today. One of them is from an administration perspective, what we're doing for the rest of the semester. And number 2, I also want to talk about, finish off authentication with you guys, and then start talking about Angular, right? Because I want to kind of talk about Angular so everyone's kind of on the right pace. If you want to do Angular, it's kind of an optional component for you to set up for this course. Okay, so let me stop the recording now so you have everything you need for assignment number or your final project, and then we'll get into the next pieces. Okay, I'll see you back in like 5 minutes.